You're fired. 2 words, delivered with all the emotional weight of a text message. Right there in the open plan office, with 19 witnesses watching through glass walls, like it was performance art. Marcus Chen didn't raise his voice when he said it. He was 32, wearing a hoodie that probably cost more than my car payment. Had this smile, like he'd just discovered a life hack nobody else knew about. He had the kind of confidence you get from never failing at anything important, because you've never actually tried anything hard. I'm David Park, 51 years old. Been writing code since Marcus was learning his multiplication tables. I started programming on a Commodore 64 when I was 12. Learned C++ in college when it was still new. Taught myself assembly language because I wanted to understand how computers actually thought, not just how to make them do tricks. I don't have a LinkedIn with 10,000 followers posting thought leadership about the future of work. I don't give keynotes at tech conferences about innovation and disruption. I don't have a personal brand. I have a GitHub repository with 300,000 lines of security code that's never failed. I'm the guy in the corner office that isn't really an office. It's more like a converted server room with a desk I brought from home. 3 monitors arranged in a semicircle. A mechanical keyboard that clicks loud enough to annoy the marketing team 2 floors down. Coffee stains on everything. Whiteboards covered in cryptographic algorithms and network diagrams. The kind that look like abstract art to anyone who doesn't understand what they're seeing. For 14 years, I built CloudFort's core security architecture from the ground up, not as part of a team, not through some agile sprint methodology with daily stand-ups and retrospectives, just me, countless nights fueled by caffeine and stubborn determination, debugging authentication protocols and patching vulnerabilities before they became headlines in tech blogs. The Titan Shield system I created protects 400 million user accounts across 73 countries. It handles 6 billion authentication requests per day. It's defended against everything from script kiddie attacks to state-sponsored intrusion attempts. It's never been breached, not once, not even close. That's not marketing spin. That's mathematics. That's cryptography. That's 14 years of paranoid attention to detail. Paying dividends. The office smells like burnt coffee and the faint ozone scent of servers running too hot, while the rest of CloudFort is upstairs doing design sprints and brainstorming sessions with Post-it notes. I'm down here in what we call the bunker, making sure the actual infrastructure doesn't collapse. I'm the reason 400 million people can access their files without getting their identities stolen. I'm the reason CloudFort can promise enterprise-grade security without lying. I'm also the only person in the building who knows that Titan Shield isn't actually CloudFort's property. And legally, it was mine. See, back in 2009, before CloudFort was CloudFort, when it was just 3 guys in a garage trying to build a better cloud storage solution, I did something that makes corporate lawyers nervous. I kept the patents. CloudFort didn't own Titan Shield. They licensed it from me. Think of it like this. They could use my engine, modify the chassis, paint it whatever color they wanted. But if they stopped paying the licensing fees, or if they violated our agreement, I could turn that engine off, remotely. Instantly. Marcus didn't know this. Or maybe he figured a 51-year-old engineer wouldn't have the energy to fight back. Or maybe he just didn't care. Because people like Marcus don't think past the next quarterly earnings call. He was the new CTO, brought in by Redwood Ventures 6 months ago to modernize operations. Corporate speak for strip out anyone over 40 and replace them with cheaper labor, who won't question the strategy or remember what the company used to stand for. Marcus Chen wasn't hired. He was installed, dropped into the org chart like a game piece, moved by someone playing corporate chess 3 levels above us. He came from Redwood's portfolio of failed startups, companies that had brilliant exits because they sold before anyone realized the product didn't actually work. He'd been CTO at 3 different companies in 5 years. That's not career progression. That's a pattern. He showed up on a Tuesday morning in early March, walking through our Seattle headquarters like he'd already decided which of us would survive the purge. He was 32, but dressed like someone doing cosplay as a tech executive. A black hoodie that probably cost $600, artisanal selvedge jeans, white sneakers so pristine they'd obviously never seen rain, an Apple Watch that buzzed every 40 seconds with notifications. He'd glance at mid-conversation to remind you he was very important and very busy. He had the kind of face that photographed well for TechCrunch articles about young innovators. Sharp jawline, perfect teeth, courtesy of expensive orthodontics, hair styled to look casually messy in a way that required product and effort. The kind of confident smile that came from never being told no about anything that mattered. But his eyes bothered me. They were too calculating, too empty. Like he was constantly running some internal cost-benefit analysis on whether you were worth his time. When he looked at you, he wasn't seeing a person. He was seeing a resource to be optimized or an obstacle to be removed. His first day, he called an all-hands meeting at 9 a.m., mandatory attendance. I showed up late because I'd been dealing with a potential security incident. Turned out to be nothing, just a misconfigured firewall in the Singapore data center. When I walked in, Marcus was already on stage, pacing back and forth with a wireless mic, like he was doing a TED Talk. "Team," he said, his voice booming through the atrium. "I'm thrilled to be here. Cloudfort is at an inflection point. You've built something amazing, but amazing isn't enough anymore. We need to be extraordinary. We need to be disruptive. We need to be the company that doesn't just compete in the market. We need to own the market." People were nodding, actually nodding like he'd said something profound, instead of just stringing together buzzwords. "I'm here to help us scale, to help us think bigger, to help us get acquired by someone who can take this vision to the next level. Because, let's be real, we're not going to IPO. The window for that closed 3 years ago. But acquisition, we can make that happen. And when we do, everyone in this room becomes wealthy. Stock options become real money. We're talking generational wealth. People, more nodding, more smiles. I stood in the back and watched, feeling like I was the only person who could see the trap being set. After the meeting, Marcus made his rounds, shaking hands, learning names, taking selfies with the younger developers who thought proximity to him would boost their careers. He moved through the office like a politician working a fundraiser. All charisma and no substance. Then he got to me. I was back at my desk, reviewing access logs, when I sensed someone standing behind me. "David." "Right," he said, not as a question, but as a statement, like he'd already decided who I was before hearing me speak. I turned around. He was looking past me at my monitors, at the code I had open, at the terminal windows running security scans. "That's some seriously dense code," he said, squinting at my screen. "Very technical." "I appreciate the craftsmanship, but we're moving toward more modern approaches. Microservices, API-first architecture, Kubernetes orchestration, the monolithic stuff." He gestured vaguely at my work. "It's impressive for its time, but it doesn't scale with our ambitions. Titan Shield handles 6 billion requests per day," I said, keeping my voice neutral. It's designed for scale. He smiled. That condescending smile I'd come to recognize as his default expression when someone disagreed with him. Sure. But scale isn't just about volume. It's about agility, adaptability, the ability to pivot quickly when market conditions change. Your architecture, and I mean this respectfully, it's engineered to be robust. But robust is another word for inflexible. I need us to be flexible. Security and flexibility are opposing forces. I said, you want one or the other. You can't have both. That's the old way of thinking. David, that's the trade-off mentality. I'm here to tell you we can have both. We just need to think differently. We need to innovate. I looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide if he actually believed what he was saying, or if he was just performing for an invisible audience. I couldn't tell. I'm always open to better approaches, I said carefully. If you have specific technical suggestions, I'm happy to review them. Oh, I'm not technical, Marcus said with a laugh. Like it was funny that the CTO didn't understand technology. That's what I have you for. I'm here for vision, strategy, deal-making. I let the engineers handle the engineering. My job is to clear obstacles and set direction. He walked away before I could respond, moving on to the next desk, the next handshake, the next performance of leadership. That's when I knew. Some fires announced themselves with smoke. Marcus was gasoline, pretending to be water. The process, it turned out, meant erasing me slowly, professionally, methodically. First, my name disappeared from the technical documentation. The architecture reviews I'd been leading for 9 years got moved to times when I had client calls. I'd walk past the conference room and see Marcus in there with the junior developers, pointing at a whiteboard with my security protocols drawn incorrectly, explaining my 14 years of work to people who thought encryption was just adding a password to a zip file. I wasn't worried yet. You don't fire the guy who holds the patents, right? That's what I kept telling myself while reviewing the latest penetration test results. In my office, overlooking Puget Sound. But the atmosphere was changing, getting thick, like fog rolling in off the water. The junior staff stopped making eye contact. The shared calendar suddenly had blocks labeled Strategic Realignment, C-suite only. That consumed entire afternoons. Then I found the Slack message. I was grabbing coffee from the break room when I saw someone's laptop open on the counter. Screen unlocked. A direct message from Marcus to the executive team. Legacy engineers creating resistance to Nexus deal. Need to optimize headcount demographics. Handling the park situation. Expect resolution before fiscal Q3. The park situation. That was me. I wasn't the chief security architect anymore. I was a problem to be solved. I looked at that message for maybe 10 seconds. My heart rate didn't even spike. See, that's the thing about people who actually build things. We don't panic. We debug. I walked back to my desk and opened the encrypted folder on my personal laptop. Not the company machine. Inside was patent licensing agreement. Fully executed .pdf. I reviewed section 9, the termination clause I'd written 14 years ago when I was young and paranoid enough to protect myself. Try me. Marcus, I whispered to the empty office. Just try me. If you've never worked in tech, let me explain the soft elimination. They don't revoke your badge access immediately. That's too obvious, too liable. Instead, they dissolve your influence with 1,000 small cuts until you're a ghost in your own building. It started with system permissions. One morning, I tried accessing the Titan Shield development environment. Got a 403 forbidden error. When I messaged Alan Chen, our DevOps lead, who I'd worked with for 8 years, He took 6 hours to respond. "Hey, David." Marcus restructured the access controls, said we needed better separation of duties. "You're on the general engineering tier now." The general engineering tier. That's where interns practiced with sandbox environments and ran unit tests. I'd been demoted from mission control to the supply closet. I walked into the office that afternoon, and the silence was crushing. You know that feeling when you enter a room and everyone's conversation just stops? It was that, but constant. My team, people I'd mentored, people whose code I'd reviewed thousands of times. They couldn't meet my eyes. The junior developers huddled around Marcus like he was some kind of tech guru, laughing at his jokes about legacy code and monolithic architectures. He'd lean back in his chair, hands behind his head, talking about microservices and containerization like he'd invented them. Sarah Kim, one of the senior engineers I'd hired 5 years ago, pulled me aside near the stairwell. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "David, I don't know what's happening, but Marcus told us in stand-up that you're resistant to change. He said the company's moving in a new direction, and anyone who can't adapt will be left behind." He didn't say your name, but everyone knew. "What did you say?" I asked. She looked at the floor. "Nothing. I'm sorry. I have a mortgage." "David." I nodded. "I understand." And I did. Fear makes people complicit. That's not philosophy. That's human nature. The final humiliation came on a Thursday. Marcus had scheduled what he called an all-hands innovation summit in the main atrium. Mandatory attendance. I showed up late, standing in the back near the coffee station, while Marcus stood on the small stage they'd set up. A wireless microphone clipped to his designer hoodie. "Team," he said, his voice booming through the space. "We're at an inflection point. Nexus Corporation sees our potential. They're offering us $420 million to join their ecosystem. But to get there, we need to shed the old ways. We need to think differently. The people who got us here won't get us where we're going. We need visionaries, not just code monkeys." People laughed. Actually laughed. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my expression neutral. Panic is for amateurs. I just watched. Observed. Calculated. Marcus continued. "Some people on this team have been resistant. They've clung to outdated security models that slow us down. They've created bottlenecks. And frankly, they've undermined our ability to deliver shareholder value." He looked directly at me. "David Park, could you come up here? Please." The room went dead silent. Every head turned toward me. I could hear the espresso machine hissing in the background. I walked to the front, slowly. My knees popped with each step, but I kept my shoulders back, my gaze level. When I reached the stage, Marcus had this expression like he'd already won. "David," he said into the microphone, making sure everyone heard, "your tenure here has been notable. But our evaluation shows you're no longer aligned with where Cloudford is headed. Effective immediately. We're terminating your employment. Security will escort you to collect your personal items." He said it like he was reading a weather report. No emotion, no acknowledgement of 14 years, just "you're fired." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. My voice was level when I spoke. No tremolo. No rage. "I understand," I said. "Before I go, I assume you've reviewed the licensing agreement for Titan Shield." Marcus smiled, that patronizing smile. "All IP developed during employment belongs to Cloudfort." "David, standard contract. Our legal team has confirmed we own the security architecture outright." Interesting, I said, because that's not what my attorney says. The smile faltered. Just a flicker, barely noticeable. JAR will process your severance, he said, waving his hand dismissively. Security. Please escort Mr. Park out. 2 security guards appeared. Young guys. Probably embarrassed. One of them wouldn't look at me. I turned and walked toward the exit, past the rows of desks, past the employees who'd become strangers, past the glass walls where I could see people already whispering, already moving on. As the elevator doors closed on the lobby, I saw my reflection. Still calm, still controlled. Marcus thought the game was over. He thought he'd won. I pulled out my phone as the elevator descended and opened my email. I typed quickly, "Linda, this is David Park. Execute contingency plan per our discussion. File the patent termination notice. Do it now." Linda Chen was my intellectual property attorney. We'd worked together since 2009. She knew every clause, every provision, every landmine I'd buried in that licensing agreement. She replied instantly. "Confirmed. Notice of termination sent to Cloudfort Legal Counsel and CEO. 24-hour clock starts now." I walked out of the building into the Seattle drizzle, got in my car, drove home, made coffee, and waited. What Marcus didn't know, what nobody in that company knew except Linda, was that I didn't just create Titan Shield. I owned it. Completely. Cloudfort had been renting my technology for 14 years, paying licensing fees that went directly to my holding company. The agreement was crystal clear. If they terminated my employment without cause, the license automatically revoked after 24 hours. Without Titan Shield, Cloudfort had no security infrastructure. Their entire cloud platform would be exposed. Every client account, every transaction, every piece of data. It would all become vulnerable the moment my authentication protocols went dark. And there was no backup, because I designed it that way. I was in my home office when my phone started vibrating. 10 missed calls, 15, 20, all from Cloudfort numbers. I ignored them. I had a book to finish, a nice Pinot Noir to drink. In exactly 23 hours and 47 minutes before everything Marcus had taken for granted ceased to exist. Let him scramble. Let him panic. Let him learn that sometimes the old guy in the corner isn't there because he can't do anything else. He's there because he's holding everything together. The first real contact came at hour 6. My phone rang with a number I recognized. Roger Hartman, Cloudfort's CEO, the man who'd hired me, the man who'd approved Marcus. I answered on the 4th ring. "Roger, David." His voice was tight, controlled panic underneath. "We received a concerning letter from your attorney regarding the Titan Shield licensing agreement. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said. "Marcus terminated my employment in front of the entire company. That violates Section 9 of our agreement. The license terminates in 18 hours. David, please." Roger's voice cracked slightly. "Let's talk about this. We can reverse the termination. We can offer you a promotion, a raise, whatever you need." I sipped my wine. "For you, Roger, I have all day." But the clock doesn't stop. 20 minutes later, a new call. This time, from Michael Torres, lead attorney at Nexus Corporation, the company trying to buy Cloudfort for $420 million. "Mr. Park." His voice was professional, but urgent. "My name is Michael Torres. I represent Nexus Corporation. We're conducting final due diligence on the Cloudfort acquisition, and your attorney has informed us of a complication regarding intellectual property ownership. Not a complication, I said calmly. A fact. I own the Titan Shield security architecture. CloudFort has been operating under a license that I'm now terminating per the agreement terms. Silence on the other end. Then, Mr. Park, our acquisition is contingent on CloudFort owning or having perpetual rights to their core technology. If that license terminates, the deal dies. Are you aware of this? I'm aware. I said. Marcus made his decision. I'm making mine. More silence. Then his tone shifted, became almost respectful. Mr. Park, do you understand what you're doing? You're not just hurting CloudFort. You're destroying $420 million in value. You're impacting hundreds of employees, their stock options, their futures. I built the security infrastructure that made this acquisition possible. I said, I spent 14 years perfecting algorithms that protect hundreds of millions of users. And Marcus Chen stood on a stage and called me a code monkey who couldn't adapt. He terminated me to impress you. So yes, Michael, I understand exactly what I'm doing. What do you want? Torres asked. There was no judgment in his voice now, just calculation, justice. I said, and my technology back? That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting today. You have 17 hours. I suggest you use them wisely. I hung up. The next 12 hours were chaos, orchestrated by silence. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Calls, texts, emails, LinkedIn messages. I ignored most of them, but I couldn't resist checking the messages from my former colleagues, the ones who'd been sending me screenshots of the meltdown happening in real time. Hour 7, Alan from DevOps. Dude, Marcus is losing it. He's been screaming at legal for 3 hours. He keeps saying, you can't do this. He called you a saboteur. HR is freaking out. Hour 9, Sarah from engineering. David, I'm so sorry. We just found out about the patents. Nobody knew. Marcus told us the IP was owned by the company. He lied to everyone. Half the engineering team is talking about quitting. Hour 12, a message from the CFO herself. David, this is Rachel Torres. Please call me. We need to find a resolution. The board is in emergency session. Nexus is threatening to walk away from the entire deal. We're offering you VP of Engineering. Full stock package. Whatever you want. Name your terms. I didn't respond to any of them. I was too busy reading the technical documentation I'd written 14 years ago, refreshing my memory on every failsafe I'd built into Titan Shield. Every kill switch. Every dependency. Hour 15. Another screenshot from Alan. This one was a Slack message from Marcus to the entire engineering department. Urgent. All hands on deck. We need to reverse engineer the Titan Shield authentication protocols immediately. David Park's termination has created an unexpected technical challenge. Anyone with security experience, report to conference room A now. I actually laughed out loud at that one. Reverse engineer in 9 hours, what took me 14 years to build. Good luck with that. Marcus, hour 17, a voicemail from Roger, his voice shaking. David, I've been on the phone with Nexus for 6 hours. They're demanding proof of IP ownership. They're saying if we can't demonstrate clear title to Titan Shield, they're pulling the offer, not reducing it, pulling it completely. David, please, call me back. I deleted the voicemail and made myself dinner. Salmon, roasted vegetables, a nice Chardonnay. If the world was ending for CloudFort, I might as well eat well. Hour 19. The screenshots kept coming. Marcus had apparently tried to call me 17 times from different numbers. When that failed, he'd sent an email with the subject line, We need to talk now. I opened it out of curiosity. The body of the email was a single sentence. You're destroying hundreds of people's livelihoods over a personal vendetta. This is beneath you. I closed the email without responding. Beneath me, Marcus had called me obsolete in front of the entire company. He'd terminated me to score points with potential buyers. He'd bet that I wouldn't fight back because I was too old, too tired, too defeated. He'd been wrong about all three. At hour 20, Roger called again. This time, his voice was different. Hollow, defeated. The voice of someone who'd just watched their empire crumble in real time. David, he said quietly, barely above a whisper, Marcus has been suspended, pending investigation. The board voted unanimously 30 minutes ago. They want to reinstate you immediately. CTO position. Reporting directly to me. $750,000 base salary. 2% equity stake. Full signing bonus. We'll make a public statement that this was all an administrative error. We'll say you were never actually terminated. Please, David, don't do this to the company. Don't do this to the 400 people who work here. They didn't do anything wrong. I stood at my window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The Space Needle lit up against the dark sky. Ferries crossing Puget Sound. The city going about its business, unaware that $100 million in market value was evaporating in real time a few miles away. Roger, I said, and my voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. Marcus didn't just fire me. He humiliated me. He stood on a stage in front of 197 employees. I counted, and called me obsolete. He called me a code monkey who couldn't adapt. He called me a bottleneck. He said the people who got us here won't get us where we're going. He did that to impress Nexus Corporation. He did that to show he was willing to make tough decisions. He bet that a 51-year-old engineer wouldn't fight back because I'd be too scared of losing my health insurance and my 401k and my stability. He bet wrong. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Roger breathing, could hear someone in the background asking a question he ignored. So what happens now? Roger finally asked. His voice was barely audible. In 4 hours, Titan Shield goes dark, I said. Every authentication server, every encryption protocol, every security layer I built over 14 years, it all shuts down. The licensing agreement terminates at exactly 7:43 a.m. Pacific Time. Your platform becomes the digital equivalent of a house, with all the locks removed and the windows smashed. 400 million user accounts become accessible to anyone with basic hacking skills. Nexus walks away from the acquisition because they're not buying a company with zero security infrastructure. Your valuation crashes from $650 million to whatever the office furniture is worth, and CloudFort becomes a cautionary tale that MBA programs use for the next decade about what happens when you disrespect the people who actually build things. David, please. Roger's voice cracked. There are 400 employees here. People with families. People with mortgages. Kids in college. You're going to destroy all of them because of one man's mistake. One man's mistake, I repeated. Roger, you hired him. You brought him in. You gave him the authority to do this. You sat in that conference room and watched him fire me, and you didn't say a single word. Not one word. So don't talk to me about one man's mistake. This was institutional. This was cultural. This was CloudFort, deciding that loyalty and expertise and 14 years of building your core technology mattered less than impressing some venture capitalists with your willingness to optimize headcount. There has to be another way, Roger said desperately. There is, I replied. But it doesn't involve me coming back to Cloudfort. It doesn't involve pretending this didn't happen. It doesn't involve letting Marcus or you or the board save face. The company you knew died the moment Marcus stood on that stage. What happens next is up to you. What do you want? David Roger asked. Just tell me what you want, and we'll make it happen. I want my technology back. I said simply, all of it. The patents, the source code, the development servers, the documentation, everything. I want Cloudfort to publicly acknowledge that Titan Shield was never your property and that you've been operating under a license that you violated. I want a formal written apology, and I want Marcus's termination to be permanent and made public with the real reasons, not some corporate speak about pursuing other opportunities. That would destroy the company, Roger said. The company is already destroyed, I replied. You just don't know it yet. Without Titan Shield, you have no product. Without a product, you have no customers. Without customers, you have no business. I'm offering you a path forward, a way to migrate to new security infrastructure over 90 days, a way to minimize the damage. But it starts with acknowledging the truth. I built your company, and you threw me away like garbage. Now you get to live with the consequences. I'll take it to the board, Roger said. You do that. You have 3 hours and 41 minutes. I hung up and poured myself another glass of wine. My hands were steady. My heart rate was normal. Engineers don't panic. We solve problems. And sometimes, the problem is that people need to learn that actions have consequences. The next morning, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. to 17 missed calls and 43 emails. The 24 hours had expired at exactly 7:43 a.m. Titan Shield had gone offline at 7:44. The kill switch I'd built in 2009 had executed flawlessly. I made coffee, French press, good beans from a roaster in Portland, opened my laptop, and watched the news unfold in real time. Cloudfort security crisis. Company confirms. Major infrastructure outage. Read one headline from TechCrunch. Breaking. Nexus Corporation withdraws 420 anonymous. Acquisition offer following IP dispute. Read another from the Wall Street Journal. Cloudfort stock plunges 73% in pre-market trading after security. Architect terminates license. Reported Bloomberg. My phone rang again. Linda Chen, my IP attorney. The woman who'd been preparing for this exact scenario since I first retained her 14 years ago. David, she said, and I could hear barely contained satisfaction in her voice. Cloudfort's board of directors is requesting an emergency meeting. They want to negotiate a complete settlement. Marcus Chen has been terminated, effective immediately. They're offering you full ownership transfer of Titan Shield, all associated code, all development servers, all documentation, and a formal written apology from the board. In exchange, you agree not to pursue patent infringement damages, and you provide them with 90 days to migrate to a new security system. They agreed to the apology I asked, genuinely surprised. They don't have a choice. Linda said, their general counsel informed them that if this goes to court, Cloudfort could be liable for up to $800 million in damages. Between the failed acquisition, shareholder lawsuits, and potential class actions from users whose data security was compromised by their misrepresentation of IP ownership. What's the dollar amount for the transition period? I asked. They're proposing a one-time payment of $12 million for a 90-day perpetual use license of the current version of Titan Shield. That gives them 3 months to build or acquire replacement security infrastructure. Plus, they want to retain you as an independent consultant at $4,000 per hour to assist with knowledge transfer. They're estimating you'll need about 300 hours. I did the math. 12 million plus 1.2 million in consulting fees, 13.2 million total. For technology I already owned and work that would take me maybe a month. What about Marcus specifically, I asked. I want his termination documented correctly. Linda paused. David, they've already filed an 8K with the SEC. Marcus Chen was terminated for gross misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. Specifically, he misrepresented to the board and to potential acquirers that Cloudfort owned intellectual property that was actually licensed. He knew about the licensing agreement and deliberately concealed it because he thought you wouldn't fight back. The SEC filing is public record. His career in tech is over. Good, I said, feeling something close to satisfaction settle in my chest. There's more, Linda continued. The board is also requesting that you agree not to publicly discuss the circumstances of your termination. They'll pay an additional $2 million for a mutual non-disparagement clause. No, I said immediately. I'm not taking money to protect their reputation. The truth is already public. The firing was public. The consequences should be public too. Understood, Linda said. I'll counter with, you'll refrain from actively pursuing media interviews, but you're not restricted from answering questions truthfully if asked. No gag order, just basic professional courtesy. That works. I agreed. They'll accept it. They're desperate. David, the company is in freefall. Every major client is demanding answers. The board is fielding calls from investors, threatening lawsuits. They need this resolved before the market opens tomorrow. Set up the meeting, I said. Neutral location. I'm not going back to that building. 3 days later, I met Roger at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. Small place called Vivace. High ceilings, exposed brick walls. The smell of fresh roasted espresso beans. Neutral territory, far from Cloudfort's headquarters, far from the scene of the crime. Roger walked in at exactly 10 a.m., looking like he'd aged 15 years in a single week. His eyes were bloodshot with dark circles underneath. His expensive suit was wrinkled, like he'd slept in it. His hands trembled slightly when he set his briefcase on the worn wooden table between us. He didn't order coffee, didn't make small talk, just sat down, pulled out a folder thick with legal documents, and slid it across the scarred surface. You won, he said simply. His voice was hoarse, damaged. Complete asset transfer agreement. Cloudfort releases all claims to Titan Shield technology, all derivative works, all associated intellectual property, all source code, all patents, past, present, and future. You drop the infringement lawsuit and agree to the 90-day transition license. We both move forward. I opened the folder carefully, methodically. Inside were 47 pages of dense legal language. I'd already reviewed them with Linda, had her annotate every clause and provision. But I read them again anyway. Every word, every definition, every termination condition. It was all there. My code, my patents, my algorithms, my 14 years of paranoid preparation and midnight debugging sessions and refused vacation days. All of it coming home where it belonged. And Marcus, I asked without looking up from the documents. Roger's jaw tightened visibly. His hands clenched into fists on the table, knuckles going white, then slowly relaxed, like he was practicing a breathing exercise his therapist had taught him. Marcus Chen is facing 3 separate lawsuits, he said, each word precise and bitter. A shareholder derivative suit for breach of fiduciary duty and fraudulent misrepresentation. A class action from employees whose stock options are now worthless because of his actions. And Nexus Corporation is suing him personally for 8 figures in damages related to the failed acquisition. His legal bills alone are going to bankrupt him, even if he somehow wins, which every attorney we've consulted says he won't. Roger's expression darkened further. We also discovered he'd been planning this for months. Our forensics team recovered deleted emails from his company laptop. He had correspondence with Redwood Ventures, discussing how to eliminate what he called legacy technical debt. That was you, David. You were technical debt to him, an expensive line item to be optimized away. He paused, looking at me with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. He specifically targeted you because he thought owning the patents outright would increase the acquisition valuation by another 50 to 70 million. He did the math, David. He calculated that firing you and claiming the IP was worth more than keeping you. He gambled that you didn't have the stomach for a legal fight, that you'd take your severance package and disappear quietly, like most people do. I looked up from the documents and met Roger's eyes. He gambled wrong. Yes, Roger said with a bitter laugh. He did. And now his name is going to be a permanent case study in every business school in America. Marcus Chen, the CTO who destroyed $420 million in shareholder value because he didn't read a 14-year-old licensing agreement. His career is over. His reputation is destroyed. No one in tech will ever hire him again. I picked up the pen Roger had brought and signed my name on every required line. My signature felt heavier than usual, like I was signing something more significant than a legal document. This was closure. This was vindication. This was 14 years of invisible work, finally, being recognized for what it was. Essential, irreplaceable, mine. Pleasure doing business with you. Roger, I said, sliding the signed documents back across the table. Roger gathered them up slowly, like each page weighed 10 pounds. Before he stood to leave, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe, or respect, or just bone-deep exhaustion. For what it's worth. David, he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the espresso machine hissing in the background. I'm sorry. I should have protected you. I should have questioned Marcus's tactics when he first started isolating you from the team. I should have remembered that you built this company. Before any of us showed up with our business plans and our exit strategies and our optimization frameworks, you deserved better than what happened. I nodded, but didn't respond. Some apologies come too late to mean anything. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with words. Roger left. I stayed at the corner table and ordered another coffee. Sat there for an hour, watching people come and go through the coffee shop, living their normal lives, completely unaware that a battle had just ended at the table by the window. Here's what Roger and Marcus and the Nexus acquisition team and every member of CloudFort's board never understood. Even if Marcus hadn't fired me, he still would have failed. The failure was inevitable from the moment he walked through those doors. With his optimization frameworks and his disruption strategies and his complete lack of understanding about how technology actually works, 3 weeks before the all-hands humiliation, I'd filed a continuation patent for Titan Shield 2.0, a quantum-resistant encryption protocol that made the current version look like a bicycle lock on a bank vault. security systems degrade over time. It's not dramatic, just slow, inevitable erosion as computing power increases exponentially. And attack vectors evolve and multiply. The Titan Shield that CloudFort was licensing, the one they thought they'd be selling to Nexus. It had maybe 5 years of useful life left. Maybe 4, with the way quantum computing research was accelerating. Titan Shield 2.0 solved this with self-healing cryptographic frameworks that adapted in real time to emerging threats. It wasn't just strong encryption, it was encryption that learned, that evolved. That changed faster than any attack could analyze it. It was unhackable, not through brute force, but through continuous transformation. 100% owned by my personal holding company. Fully patented across 17 countries. Ready to deploy the moment I wanted to. Marcus thought he was selling Fort Knox to Nexus. He was actually selling a wooden fence with peeling paint. And I held the only blueprints to the real vault sitting unused in my garage. 2 weeks after signing the settlement agreement, I went back to CloudFort headquarters one final time. Not for a meeting, just to collect some personal equipment I'd left behind in the chaos. A backup drive, some technical manuals, a photo of my father from when he'd visited the office 5 years ago. The receptionist recognized me. Ashley, 23 years old, friendly, always remembered to ask about my weekend. When she saw me walk through the glass doors, her expression went from professional smile to visible discomfort. She buzzed me through without the usual small talk, without asking how I was doing, without the pleasantries we'd shared for years. The office felt different, hollowed out. The energy was gone. The open collaboration spaces that used to buzz with meetings and brainstorming sessions were empty. Half the desks looked abandoned. Laptops removed, chairs pushed in with geometric precision. That specific kind of emptiness that signals people who aren't coming back, and probably never should have left. Marcus's office on the 3rd floor was dark behind its glass walls. The standing desk was gone. The motivational posters about disruption and innovation and thinking different had been removed, leaving rectangular shadows on the white paint where they'd hung for 6 months. Even his nameplate had been unscrewed from the nail, leaving 2 small holes and nothing else. I found Sarah Kim in the break room, making tea with hands that shook slightly. When she saw me, her eyes immediately welled up with tears. She tried to blink away. "David, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "We didn't know about the licensing agreement. I swear we didn't know. If we had known what Marcus was planning, if we'd known what he was going to do to you." I cut her off gently. "Don't. You did what you had to do to keep your job and pay your mortgage and support your family. I don't hold that against you or anyone else who stayed silent. This wasn't about you. This was about Marcus Chen thinking he could steal 14 years of my work and get away with it because I was too old and too tired and too scared to fight back." She nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "What's going to happen to CloudFort? To all of us? I don't know," I said honestly, and I didn't. That's not my problem anymore. But if you want my advice, start looking for a new job. The company has 90 days to build or acquire entirely new security infrastructure from scratch. That's not a lot of time. And without functional security, the clients are going to leave. And without clients, there's no company. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Starting something new." I said, "Something smaller, something where the people who actually build the technology own the technology. Something where loyalty runs both directions instead of just up toward management." I collected my things: personal laptop, external drive, the framed photo of my father standing proudly in front of the Titan Shield logo, my favorite coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Engineer," and walked through the office one last time, past the empty desks, past the conference rooms with their whiteboards still covered in Marcus's buzzword-heavy strategy sessions, past the atrium where I'd been fired in front of 197 witnesses. I didn't pause, didn't look back, didn't need to. Some chapters end, others begin. This was both. 2 months later, on a Wednesday morning, I got a text message from Alan Chen. "Haven't talked in a while. How have you been then?" 3 seconds later, "Actually, scratch that. Want to build something real, 6 of us, from the old Cloud Fort team. We're starting a security company, actual security. Not VC-funded vaporware. No outside money until we're profitable. No executives who don't understand code. Interested?" I smiled at my phone and typed back, "Absolutely. When do we start?" His response came immediately. "Yesterday. We're already writing code. Just needed our fearless leader." I shut down my laptop, packed a bag, and headed to the airport. Seattle was behind me. San Francisco was waiting. Something new was beginning. 4 weeks later, Titan Shield 2.0 was in beta testing with our first 3 clients, companies that had left CloudFort after the security crisis, and were willing to trust a startup run by the guy who'd built the original system. 6 months after that, we had 17 clients and were profitable. A year later, we had 49 clients and turned down our first acquisition offer. Because we weren't interested in selling, we built something that lasted. Here's what I learned from this entire experience. Corporate America loves to talk about innovation and disruption, and thinking different and challenging the status quo. But the moment someone actually does something different, like protecting their intellectual property, or refusing to be erased quietly, or fighting back when wronged, suddenly you're difficult. You're not a team player. You're resistant to change. You're the problem. What they really want is compliance, dressed up as innovation. They want you to believe you're building the future, while they own everything you create and can discard you the moment your salary becomes inconvenient, or your experience makes you expensive. Marcus Chen thought he was optimizing for efficiency and maximizing shareholder value and positioning for a strategic exit. What he actually did was prove that some people aren't assets to be managed on a spreadsheet. They're forces to be respected. And when you disrespect a force, when you try to erase it, or minimize it, or steal from it, it doesn't just disappear. It reorganizes. It adapts. It comes back stronger and smarter and more dangerous than before. The patents were safe. The technology was mine. The team was reassembling around shared values instead of stock options. And I was just getting started on the next chapter. Before I go, let me say this. If you enjoyed watching corporate arrogance get the reality check it desperately needed, hit that subscribe button and upvote this post. I need the algorithm to know that stories about actual justice still matter in a world drowning in corporate speak and empty promises. Thanks for that. Now for the lesson that cost CloudFort $420 million to learn. Read your contracts. Every single word, every clause, every provision, every definition in the appendix that seems like boilerplate, but might be the most important paragraph in the document, especially the parts about intellectual property ownership and licensing terms and termination conditions. If you create something valuable, if you write code or develop technology or invent processes that make a company successful, protect it, document it, own it if you can. Don't assume the company will take care of you because you've been loyal for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. Loyalty in corporate America is a one-way street, and it only flows upward toward executives and shareholders. It never flows down to the people who actually build things. Real power doesn't announce itself with fancy titles in corner offices and all-hands meetings about disruption. Real power builds quietly in the background, creates value that's difficult to replace, documents everything, and when necessary, when pushed too far, when disrespected beyond tolerance, real power acts with precision and without mercy. Marcus Chen learned this lesson. It cost him his career, his reputation, and potentially his financial future. Cloudfort learned this lesson. It cost them $420 million in acquisition value, 73% of their market capitalization, and their entire security infrastructure. Roger Hartman learned this lesson. It probably cost him his job, too. Though I stopped following Cloudfort's news about 3 months after the settlement. Some lessons are expensive. Some lessons cost everything. Make sure you're not the one paying for them. Thanks for listening. Now go read your employment contract. Seriously, do it today. You might be surprised what you find.